Hi, I am Draken, and this is the SP Draken channel, my author channel. And I have my first review just come back. The book hasn't been released yet. It hasn't actually gone out to any press or anything else or any proper reviewers in that sense. This is reviews that have come back from the publishing company when I put my original submission in. I've had a summary back. It's only a short summary, but it's basically a quick summary of the reports that came back from the reviewers. So with the publishing company, it went before a panel of 8 people to review. They make the decision then to say yes or no as to whether the manuscript should go forward or not. And they've come back now with the summary. Obviously, I've already got the book deal, as I announced in one of my previous videos, but they've come back and given us a quick summary of the sort of things that came back from the reviewers itself. And here with the report, it says, between all reports, we can confirm that all reviewers gave positive feedback, which is absolutely really nice to hear. But I wanted to just take a moment. I'm not going to read the whole of this manuscript. Obviously, this is between me and the publishing house, but I thought there's some elements in here that, for me, it's really nice to hear coming back, but also it's nice to sort of put out there as well, because there's some bits we can talk around as well in regards to what's put in this review as well. That I think is really important for anyone who's trying to get themselves published or get out there and writing some useful information. So to begin with, straight off the bat, it says here, your manuscript was very well drafted in the way of a story from the very first paragraph. The correct usage of grammar was detected without hardly any editing issues on initial submission. Now, I'm going to stop there at that point. I'm going to point this out, actually. This is really important if you're doing writing. Now, if you are going for a publishing house, you are almost certainly going to have an editor jumping on board with your manuscript. If you're self-publishing, you would normally, it depends on how polished you want your script, but quite often there are a lot of independent editors out there, so you'd probably send your book on to an editor even if you're self-publishing. Really important. The idea of an editor isn't to turn around and redo your whole story. It's to basically polish it up. It's to find the mistakes that you make. Everything from grammatical mistakes to, sentence structure to even just things like continuity, all those sort of elements that, you can accidentally miss. It's not just proofreading, so to speak. It's not just pulling out the spelling errors and getting the sentence structure right. It's about making sure everything works together, that the story in the book works really strongly throughout, and it's still an enticing book and portrays basically what the author is trying to put across. In many senses, the editor is basically the person who brings the polish to it. It's the same as in the music world where you've got producers. Your musician goes out, they compose a track, they pass it to the producer comes along and then polishes up the track, adds a little bit to it, or polishes it up, finds where it's this could be a little bit better in its musical composition. The same with writing. The author goes away, writes the whole story, the editor comes along then afterwards and edits it back out again. But what I like about this is that it says in here that there was hardly any editing issues upon submission, which is great, because I think it's really important that authors also do their own editorial side as well before submitting to an editor. Now, you could sort of think, well, hang on a minute, I'm the author, knowing this relationship between authors and editors, that why should the author need to be too worried about doing their own editing if an editor is going to be going through it anyway? But with your editor, what you want the editor to do is focus on the bits that you couldn't catch. Now, with all the best will in the world, people are going to make mistakes, especially if you're writing a manuscript that is, it's going to be hundreds of pages long. You will have mistakes crop up there. But what you don't want to do is have them picking up all the mistakes that you could have actually picked up yourself. You want them to focus on the bits that you couldn't get. So if you turn around and just go, right, I've written the book, I've done it at once, quick glance over, and I'm going to send it off, then what's going to happen is that they're going to pick up that book and they're going to be spending a lot of time picking up stuff that you could have picked up. And if you've got so much that they've got to be looking at, what they're going to potentially miss, and you can still miss things at editorial stage, is the things that you couldn't have picked up. And really what you want your editor to be doing is looking for the bits that you need them to fill in the gaps that you couldn't do yourself. So the less work you can put onto the editor in editorial means the more they can focus on the bits that are really important to actually concentrate on the bits where you're not so strong, rather than saying, hey, look, I could have done this bit myself. So I think it's really important as authors that we still do a lot of editorial ourselves. I mean, when you've written the book, we talk about how many times you write the book and rewrite the book. But even after you've written the book, there should be several more drafts where you're going through and you're doing self-editorial, and you should do that several times at least in that process, so that when you submit your book over to the editor, it's as polished as you can make it, so that when it goes over, the editor looks at that book and says, right, okay, I can see that it's been polished, you've put some time and care into this, but now let's go and see if we can actually do that final bit of polish and really buff it up to actually being the highest standard it could actually be. So that's a really positive thing from the report to say that they've noticed this highly, because I went through several drafts. I didn't just rewrite the book. I also went through, did several more drafts, went through, read it, turned around and did my own self-editorial. And it's a hard process doing self-editorial, because sometimes you've got to be a bit brutal with yourself as well and sort of say, actually, does this serve the story? Or have I done the right thing here? Or do I need to change something here to make things better? So there's a lot of that goes on as well. And that means being actually quite critical with yourself when going through it. But if you can accomplish that, that means you can pass it to the editor, and the editor can then focus on the final bits of actually getting it to the highest standards it is without having to go through all of the rest of, it's like seeing the woods for the trees. If there are so many of them, you're not going to find easily the bits that you really need to pull out and you really need them to focus on, and where they can put their actual expertise and their experience into it and really make it shine and glow. Carrying on the report, it says it was stated that the storyline captivated our reviewers within the first few pages, meaning that the story was strong enough to keep reviewers interested and intrigued, which is great, because especially your first couple of pages, that's your selling point into the book. You think there are several points, and I'll go into this in a bit more detail in a minute, but there are several points where you got the chance to captivate the potential reader. Obviously, your book cover is very important. Reviews are going to be very, very important as you're going through it. Your blurb on the back of the book is very important to getting people in, but also so too, very much so, is that sort of first opening paragraphs and pages that bring people into the book. Because you imagine you've got someone browsing the shelves, they see your book, they pick it up, what they're going to do, they like the cover, they like the blurb, they're going to pick it up and they're going to read the first couple of paragraphs or pages to say, hey, is this a writing style that I can get on with? Is this something that's going to make me want to read more of it? So you really need to capture people in that's a very key segment to capture people, and I'm glad that they come back and said it sort of captivated them at that point. It was also noted that the descriptions portrayed within the manuscript were of high regard, and it was easy for the reviewers to create the scenes and characters within their minds. This is highly important to any manuscript, as readers feel that they need to become a part of your manuscript to be able to create the vision in their minds. From the reports given, your manuscript was able to deliver on the imagination based on the way you describe the scenes, settings, and characters. Now, this is really good, actually. I like this a lot as well. This is really important, especially for science fiction. It's important in all fiction. Being able to actually get the reader to be able to see what you're thinking about, what you're trying to convey as an author in your writing, and being able to actually convey that over is a real critical piece of writing. But you think, like, if it's a modern day fiction, you don't need to go to the level of detail that you may need to do in, say, something like fantasy on sci-fi. And I would argue that sci-fi is even more so than, say, fantasy, because fantasy's got full of tropes. We know what an elf looks like, we know what a dwarf looks like in fantasy, we know what a dragon looks like, what a sword looks like, etc. But in science fiction, there is such a wide breadth of way the universe can work that means that you don't have those same assumptions in the sci-fi world that you can have in other places, whether it's modern day writing or even in a fantasy writing. So sci-fi, you've really got to be able to help try and get that scene and sell that scene and visualize it. But the importance here as well, and it goes on a bit more in detail into this as well, is that you still need to balance it. You can't just have pure descriptive all the time, because otherwise all you've got is description, description, description. I remember someone I used to speak to many years ago describing Lord of the Rings. The problem with J.R.R. Tolkien was that he would spend a paragraph describing a battle and then 3 pages describing a rock, which, Tolkien's great. I mean, Tolkien got me into reading, and Tolkien's amazing in that sense. But when you think about it in terms of writing and everything else, do you really need to spend 3 pages describing a rock and then only, a paragraph describing a battle? Which way round should it be? But it's also about progression of storyline, plot. You want people to be able to actually carry on and progress with it. So you don't want to be bogged down in the descriptions, but you'd be able to need to give enough description that people can turn around and sort of go, I've got an idea. Now, everyone's going to have a slightly different idea in their head, especially when it comes to sci-fi. They'll read it and they'll make their own image in their mind. But if it can conjure that image in people's minds, they put the details in, then that's great. You're already won half the battle. They're already starting to engage in your universe. They can see how it works in that universe. And then you follow up with sort of compelling plot lines and story and dialogue, etc. And just going on from here, you got manuscripts must be able to captivate readers within the first 3 chapters or they lose interest. However, your manuscript was able to do that within the first chapter, which sets a high level of writing abilities. That's really nice to hear that actually, and that's right. What they're talking about there is the fact that okay, you got the bit that I was just talking about where it's like you've got to sell the book, so people have got to be able to get into it. So your first like paragraphs and your first couple of pages have got to be able to sell that book and really grip them and give them that intrigue and curiosity that they want to know what happens next. But after that point, there are several more key points through the book where you can lose a reader. And, someone could pick up a book, people think about this, they sort of think, oh, right, I've got you into the book. Once people start reading a book, that's it. That's not true. People will stop reading books if they're finding they're not getting on with the book, if they find it too hard. And people will usually make that decision, usually, as they've said here, within the first several chapters. If you get past the first several chapters, there's a very good chance that they will go on and read the rest of the book because as long as the rest of the book is to the same standard as your first couple of chapters, then you're not likely to lose them after that point. But people make up their minds on those first couple of chapters. So if you can grab people in that first chapter already, you're doing well. Obviously, the importance there is then to maintain that consistency throughout the rest of the books to say, right, okay, thank you for putting your faith in me for reading this far. Let me not let you down by giving you a whole complete story and that progress. But it's really great to read that it is actually getting that sort of it where people are getting hooked from the first chapter. People will usually give it, there is a drop off usually after the first chapter, but you'll find when you get to about like the third chapter, most people will have made up their mind as to whether this is a book that they're going to continue reading. It's not always necessarily true. Sometimes people put it down in book chapters 4, 5, and 6, etc. People give it a little bit more of a chance or less, depends on the person reading it really, and obviously what they're reading and whether there's still how much potential they see in the book. But you really need to sell it early on to be able to sort of say to them, hey, look, this is what you're going to get on with. This is something you want to find out what's next. And so doing that very early on is great news. So they finish it off with, overall, there are no negatives to any reports given towards your manuscript, and we are confident that readers will be captivated by your style of writing, storytelling, and the descriptive concept, which is sure to keep readers interested. It's great. I mean, it's really nice to have this glowing report. I'll be honest, I was kind of hoping for some negative feedback, really, weirdly. It's one of those things that, I over the years, when I first started in writing, you're very self-conscious. You don't like criticism. You hate criticism because you're like, oh, no, I've written this and it's really nice and I want everyone to love it. And when people come back and give you negative criticism, or not necessarily negative criticism, but criticism, they'll turn around and say, look, you could do better there, you can do here. You kind of sort of feel a bit like attacked and like, oh, no. But then as you go on, as I've learned over the years when I've been doing my writing, is actually really appreciate criticism, and sometimes I haven't always displayed it in the best way, because when you first receive criticism you feel a bit like still, oh my god, what's going on here? But actually, really, a lot of the times that some of that criticism that I've received when I sort of given it to friends over the years, the various different versions, and got people to read it, and they've come back with bits and pieces, it's been bits that I've sort of gone away and thought and gone, actually, could I improve that? Could I do better? And that's actually helped me with my future drafts and everything else and future rewrites to sort of go, actually, how can I do this better? And you got to remember, there's a difference between obviously just people just attacking and saying, I don't like it, to the value of someone saying, look, actually, maybe you should have done this, or maybe this would be better if this happened, or I didn't like this bit because of X, Y, and Z. That's good criticism. That's stuff that you can use as feedback to actually improve forward. So there's a little bit of like, oh, I haven't got any criticism in here. So I've got used to actually wanting to seek out like criticism, because I'm constantly wanting to try and improve what I do. I want to get better, and I want to be doing the best that I possibly can. Obviously, from the point of view of the fact that I am been trying to get a publishing company on board and everything else, and they've accepted us and everything else, the fact that they come back with a completely glowing report is actually really positive. It's really good. It's exactly what you want. But there's also a part of me that's sort of kind of like, oh, I haven't got any negative criticism. Where do I go from here? I'm sure when it goes through editorial, though, there will be plenty of stuff that comes back in the editorial side, and that will be the point where it'd be like, yeah, you need to do this better or that better. And that'll be great when that comes into there. But no, it's nice. But at the same time, it's also important to get positive feedback as well. And it's not just for the, oh, this is a nice glowing feeling, because, it is. It's a nice glowing feeling to get, positive review back and say, hey, this all works really well. This is really good. Well done. Really good book and everything else like that. Really enjoying it. But also it's the fact that when that feedback comes back and tells you why it's a positive feedback, and like they have done in this review here, where they've talked about being able to sort of visualize up and captivate audiences, it tells you what you're doing well. It tells you what you shouldn't change. It tells you these are your strong points, and sometimes we can get lost so much trying to fix things that we forget that we've also got strong points, and you can lose your strong points while you're trying to fix your weak points, so to speak. And so actually it's important to know and important to take on board as well the good feedback as well as the negative feedback, but take it in the right way that enables you to go, right, okay, I know what's working, I know my style, I know how I write, and I know what my strong points are, that's selling it to people, therefore I should be keeping with it. But that's this. I just wanted to do a quick video talking about this review that I just had back from the publishers. I'm very happy, obviously, with the review that's gone through, and well, stick around and like and subscribe if you've enjoyed this, and if any of this has actually helped you out, like and subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to grow the channel here, obviously, you know, just to create an environment, not just to talk about selling the books itself, but also just to talk about the environment all around it, whether it's talking about the universe itself or whether it's talking about the process of writing and everything else. So I'd really like you guys to all come here and join me on this journey as I'm going through it all, learning the pitfalls as well. I'm sure there are things that I'm going to be discovering as I'm going along that are going to be like, right, okay, there's lessons learned here, let's get better. But I'd like to see you around on the channel more often, and I hope to see you soon. Take care all.